I'd like to just give you a little bit of idea of the Music Place. We have a video called My Spiritual Journey, which is really the story of how Music Place began and how it all evolved and all of that, but I just want to give you a little bit of an overview. In 1977, I had 2 children. I have 4 children now, but at that time I had a 2-week-old child and a 2-year-old child, and I was in a church gathering where we had been seeking the Lord for direction for our lives, and my husband and I went up to be prayed for. And when we were being prayed for, I at that time was really involved in teaching. I taught in a Bible college, and I was teaching adults, and thought that was where real ministry was. That was the really important stuff, because kids scared me to death, and I was barely surviving as a mother. I was like, because when I was about 10, I kind of just grew up and didn't get to really be a child anymore, and so being kid-like was kind of scary for me, and that's why this is all a miracle. But at that gathering, we had 3 visiting ministers that came in, and they were people who were known for having a strong prayer life and getting insight from God. And while one of them was praying for me, he said, "You know, as I'm praying for you, this picture comes to my mind of you doing something really creative with children." These are people that don't know me. Doing something really creative with children. In fact, I see that you're kind of like, I see children kind of in my mind's eye gathering at your knees, and you're just loving on them because you've come from a hard path, and you're going to be like I can see you like a mother in Israel. I'm like, I'm barely surviving as a mother. This makes no sense at all. And he says, in fact, I see something doing something really creative with music that's very unique, that no one else is doing. And the children that you're going to gather together will become like door openers into many dark homes. And he said, I think it's with music. And of course that was all really cool because they didn't know me. And so my pastor very graciously at that time pulled me aside, and my husband aside, and said, you know, God could have encouraged you about a lot of things we already knew about you. You know, like we know you do this and we know you do that. But I think that when everybody heard this, they're like, Janice? You know, they were having the same response that I was, because I really was very sort of rigid and I don't know if I was ever rigid, but I was just very serious about everything. And so my pastor took me aside. You know, he said, you know, I suggest that like anything, when somebody shares something with you that they have on their heart, or some direction or some encouragement, because the Bible talks about don't neglect the gift that's given you by the laying on of hands of leaders, and that's what was happening. He said, like everything, we just take that to the Lord and say, God, is this what you're saying? Are you saying something to do this? And of course I promptly forgot and never talked to God about it. And then 6 years later, by then I had 2 more children, and 6 years later I realized I had so many children, and they were so little, and they were so close together. You know, they were all born within 6 years. So I was just exhausted all the time. But I had already started teaching music, you know, just private lessons. But I thought, how can I be more efficient in what I do? I thought, I know, I'll teach them in groups. And so I began working with kids in groups, and then God began to give me, just explode creativity in me, and not only the idea of working with groups of children, but the idea that of understanding how children are, how they learn, how they develop, how to teach them, began to pour into me over a period of time. And I'll never forget, one day in late 1983, I did it all in my home. And so I was sitting in my home, and I had all these kids around, and all of a sudden the Lord brought that back to me from 6 years before. And that reminder that, look at you have all these kids around you. And in many of their lives, God had opened lots of doors for me to communicate with parents about God's love and all of that. And that's a primary motivation in my life. And it was happening. There it was. And I hadn't done anything to make it happen. It just had unraveled, unfolded. And I came unraveled, but it kind of unfolded. And so from there, I began to, I was challenged by a mentor in my life to begin to reproduce myself. In fact, I'd always been challenged that way as I had walked with God in my life. And the challenge was, whatever you have, and this is my challenge to you, whatever God has put in you, that's something that He wants you to give away. That's something it's not for you, it's for you to give away. It's something that you should reproduce yourself. So even over these days and times together, we're going to look at who we are and how God made us uniquely. And at the music place, we have such a heart to understand what is the uniqueness of every individual and what is the uniqueness of the teacher, and then we want to match those together. So if you're here, it's because you love little kids. There's a unique gifting in you in that area, and we'll find out how that's going to be expressed in various ways. So I was challenged to begin to reproduce myself, and the only way I need to do that is just to I talk to a teacher and have them follow me around. I didn't know, I didn't have any training program, I just had them follow me around, and then eventually we made videos, and some of you have seen some of those horrible, boring videos, but anything we could do to facilitate the development of young teachers, particularly teachers that are open enough and teachable enough to understand different ways to teach different kinds of children, because they're all different and they're all very unique. And so at the end of, that was in 1983, I saw that little group of children, and about that time I had about 40 private lesson students that I was teaching. And then in 1984, God really put it strongly on my heart that I need to actually start, make it something more official than just Janice music. I needed to do more than that. And so we got a name, and my friend Pat, that now actually works in her office, was that we've been friends for 25 years. She and I talked a lot about ways that kids could be gathered together, and we kind of dreamed those things together. I had a dream that someday I'd be able to teach kids how to do worship, and I just didn't know how any of that would happen. But the way that I found that it had to happen was one step at a time. Just one step at a time, because I was just a creative person, a teacher, who loved kids. I grew to love kids because I started having so many. And as I had them, I got more comfortable with them. And by the time I'd had, 4 of them, I was familiar with different ages. I was still kind of nervous about the older ones, like junior high age, but I had taught that age before. But working with really young children became something was really exciting for me. So early musical awareness was really born out of that. And what God began to show me is that you need to break things down in individual, small, tiny little units. And so we developed page-by-page curriculums that you're going to be getting familiar with, one quarter note at a time, one theory element at a time, one instrument at a time, one solfege piece at a time, so that children can learn in a way that works for them. And I just also felt like it just needed to be really fun. And so we actually became the music place in 1984. And then over time, it's just me and my 40 students. And then, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I was like, God, I don't know what I'm doing, And out of that, God's faithfulness is He began to show me. About every 6 months, He would put something in my heart. And in early 1985, there's a scripture in Isaiah that says, "Stretch forth your tent, strengthen your stakes, because I'm going to bring more. I'm going to increase you." And I was like, yeah, okay. So we worked hard, and then Mike began to help with. He got his first computer at that time, and that was a long time ago. And he loved all of that. And so he said, "Is there anything I can kind of help with technologically?" I'm like, "Oh, sure." I didn't even know what computers could do. So let's make a little database, do mailing labels. Let's do whatever we needed to do. And so with Mike's help and with God's direction, between 1984 and 1987, we increased from 40 students to 400 students.
Wow.
It almost killed me. Because I was still keeping track of everybody's money in my head. I still kind of just had all those useless bits of information. And by that time, we had a few teachers. Obviously, I wasn't teaching all 400 students.
I was going to say that.
And it became an administrative nightmare, because that wasn't what I was called. I wasn't called to administrate. I was called to teach and influence and lead. And so we hired, our first person to work with us in, I don't know, maybe 85 or 86. And it was just crazy, because it grew so fast that I really didn't know what was going on. And I felt extremely insecure about all that. And so a lot of times I would do crazy things like, okay, you want a class in Palo Alto and you want it to be what? Okay, dance. We can make that happen because, And at that same time, and so I did a lot of crazy things because I didn't know how to streamline, I didn't know how to really be a manager, I run a business or anything like that. And then during those 3 years, my first husband and our marriage failed. And so I met Mike in 1987, and that's when he began to help us with all the computer stuff, and that was when things really, well, that's maybe I met him, no, I'm sorry, I met him in 1985. So my husband and I separated at the end of 84. Mike and I were friends for a few years in 1985, and then we were married in late 87, so we've been married 21 years.
Wow.
Yay! And he had never been married, he'd never had children, he'd never had a business.
Wow.
And then he got it all. You know,
Wow.
so yeah, and he's amazing. He's the opposite of me in every way. People ask him if he's musical, and he always tells people the story that he took piano lessons from me. He actually even rented a piano, and he did that until he knew that I was going to marry him, and then he sent the piano back and figured he could get it for free. And he never took another lesson.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But he's extremely gifted in technology and administrative things, so it was just a real gift to the music place, and I'm sure that none of this would be here if it weren't for him. Wow. And the goodness of God. One of the things you'll find out is I cry a lot because I'm so overcome. I sit and look at a group like this and think, how amazing is this? Because every 6 months it was like, okay, God, what do we do now? And He would give us another direction. You know, hire people who, it's okay to hire people who don't have a relationship with God. Or train teachers this way, or open up, move out of your home and do it. And so this became our first public building in 1994. We moved out of my home and teachers' homes, and we had this central location, and then we had another huge expansion from about 400 to 700. And it was just, again, so because we weren't used to people walking in off the street or anything like that. But the real issue is, I believe that the dream that God put in my heart was to, I'm not a really highly technically competent musician, but I can teach. And so technical skill, I had teachers when I was young that were wonderfully technical, but they couldn't really teach. How many of you had some teachers like that? And then I had some who could teach, and they just made it so fun. I didn't care how much technical ability they had, because they engaged me, and then it made me want to learn more. And I thought, I want to be that kind of teacher. And so my vision here, and the Music Place vision, is that we look at the individual child, we make it fun for them, we inspire them, we find ways to care for them and for their families in a way that communicates God's love. And we tell everybody, I know not all of you will talk about or feel about God like I do, but to work here, you just need to know we do that a lot here, because most of the people do. And we don't want anybody to feel left out. We have teachers who are Jewish and Buddhist and Muslim and all different persuasions, religious traditions. But what's important is that we treat each other with God's love and kindness, and that if somebody's going to teach here, they have to be comfortable with the fact that we talk about God and pray to Jesus all the time. And if you're not comfortable with that, then you're probably not going to be comfortable here. But if you have a heart and a vision to see children be inspired based on who they are and how God made them uniquely, and that you want to be the kind of teacher that teaches to the child and that doesn't say, I hope it works for you, this is the way I teach. Because if you're that kind of teacher, then in my mind you don't fit here. But if you're the kind of teacher that says, I'm going to learn how to teach this kind of child, obviously you are, because you're willing to put in the time to come here, and I really appreciate that. So God bless you as you begin that journey, and you have materials that explain a little bit more about our mission, our core values. I encourage you to look at those, get familiar with those. Those are born out of the things that God put in our hearts over the years. And very excitingly, last year in July, my husband had always been working. He's a software developer and has a degree in electrical engineering. And so he worked in Silicon Valley type stuff for 25 years. And then a couple years, during that time, he was able to reduce his hours. He saw I was going totally crazy. And so he reduced his hours to 3 days a week, and became available 2 days a week to help, and that was just huge. And then he gradually kind of reduced that, and then finally last year in July he became full-time here. That doesn't mean he has full-time pay. So he gives a great deal to make this all happen, because we don't do this for the money. Our profit is very low. We're happy when we have a profit. But we do it to care for people. Mike always said, you know, I'll support you as long as you don't lose money. And so he, for all those years, just, you know, worked and supported me so I could have all this fun with teachers and kids. I stopped doing teaching myself about 6 or 7 years ago, so I could do more teacher training and assessments of individual students, and I really am enjoying that part of it, especially with people like Jamie and others that come along administratively, and you'll get to know them over time too. So the vision of the music place is all about God and about the individuality of the child and how we can give that away through who we are. So welcome, and thanks for listening.
Cool. So we're gonna do some boring stuff now, and that includes they're passing these out. So everybody knows what these if you haven't gotten one.
I would.
Okay. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to take out this little front cover thing and put your name on it, because there's going to be a lot of these around, and you know, you're free to like write all over it and do whatever you want because it's your material. So we want to know who to give it back to. Okay.
And always come with a pen.
And always come with a pen. We do have extras in the bag. And I'll take it. Thanks. So yeah, put your name up there. And I'll know that you're done when I have your eyes. Okay, awesome. The second thing I'd like you to do is, so there's 3 tabs, 3 dividers in your binder. If you could go to the second tab, the training tab, the very first piece of paper there, after the training tab, it says proprietary curriculum and materials agreement. And we need you all to sign this, but read it first. But basically, all this stuff has come out of Janice's brain, and it's, you know, and it's the music place's intellectual property and everything. And so we just, if you decide not to go through and become a music place teacher or whatever, it would not be ethical to like take this whole curriculum and then go like start your own music place somewhere. You know, that's just wouldn't be right. So this just protects the curriculum and everything. It also protects the materials, because we're going to be giving you these curriculums, we're going to be giving you DVDs and all that stuff, and so if you lose it, we need a way to, you know, to refund the replacement copies for that. So if you could read that, and then print, sign, and date it, that would be great, and then I'm actually going to collect them from you, make a copy, and then give it back. So take time now
Just
to
take a couple minutes.
Yep, take a couple minutes. Just read that. The next thing I want to do is just kind of put a disclaimer on this training program. So this has been my job this year. One of my jobs this year is to create this training program that you guys are going to be going through. So we're going to be kind of like shuffling and adding stuff as we go, as we see a need. If somebody's like, oh my gosh, I just wish I had that, I'll make it and then I'll give it to you, you know. So, or if I'm going to be giving you the schedule for, you know, all of the sessions, but say an issue comes up today that you feel really inequipped about, and then Janice and I will be like, okay, we'll add that into the schedule, you know, 2 weeks from now and cover it. So this is going to be like, you know, you're going to be receiving new versions of stuff. I'll give you extra stuff as we think of it. And, so the first thing that I want to do is to just go over the schedule, and like I said, we'll probably give you a revised version of it each time as we adjust things to your needs. So I'm giving you 3 pages that are not stapled, because I'll probably give you a new one when we get more details. Let's just go through this. So we are in session 1. What's going to happen for the rest of the day, you'll see there. The times are